Okay, cool. Well, we've got Emmanuel lined up. We will hand the stage over, and they're going to talk about dates gone wrong. And I'm really hoping it's the physical dates.
That one's like on Tinder.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, it could go either way at this stage, but I just came back from Perth, and I've messed up so many dates and time zones in the last 3 days. I'm excited about this.
Good evening, everyone. Hope you can hear me well back there. Thank you for being here. So let's talk about dates gone wrong. I'm not sure whether we're going to talk about Tinder or not, but just to make sure that all of us are on the same page, no, I'm not going to talk about Tinder or going on that romantic dinner with your significant other and that date going horribly wrong. I will talk about a slightly less tricky subject. We're going to be talking about dates and times. Now, I need some volunteers to read out this date for me. So you can raise your hands. So come on, raise your hands. Who's going to answer this question for me? Anybody? Yes.
Qualifying question though. Where am I reading?
So he's asking me, he's giving me a qualifying question. Where is this? Whether this is in the US or in Australia. Okay, let's say it's Australia. So 2nd of December 2007. I know you told me your name earlier. Pierre, right? Pierre says 2nd of December 2007. Any other interpretations? Even anybody on Zoom, if they've got any answers? Nothing yet? Yes? 7th of December 2002. Okay.
2nd of December 1907.
2nd of December 1907. Okay. Wow. Wow. I not even thought about that one.
That's the old
Yeah.
one.
Okay. I don't think that's it. Yep. December 7th, 2002. December 7th, 2000. Yeah, so that's from Zoom. Okay, let's see. So over here, Pierre said 2nd December 2007. Australia and most countries. We had a very pertinent question there. Australia and Europe and United Kingdom use the format of day, month, and year. Then over here, I had another answer, 12th February 2007. Now, if you are in the US, that's correct. The date format is month, day, and year in the US. Then on Zoom, they said 7th December 2002. So, oh, sorry. So countries like China, Korea, and Iran use the date format year, month, day. That wasn't too tricky, was it? So I'm Emmanuel Tissera, and I've been in software and web development for over 21 years now. My first program was an alarm clock I wrote on an IBM 386 back in the 90s. So you'll need to forgive my fascination with dates and times. As we discussed earlier, and as you may have realized now, dates and times can be tricky. Could be much trickier than that romantic date. So our challenge is to design and develop our software for a global and regional audience. What does this mean? Let's have a look. We will first look at some common issues or pitfalls with dates and times. Look at the statement on the screen. It says the meetup is at 5:45 p.m. today. Do you see any problem with that? Can I ask any of you to raise your hands if you feel I made an incorrect statement here? Anybody? Any hands?
Which time zone?
Which time zone? Robert has raised his hand.
Perth is on the chat.
Okay, one more. So two people are saying this is wrong. So, but this statement is true to me, right? And to the rest of you who are here in Melbourne. But if I say this to somebody who's joining from another state, or for Mish, who usually joins us from Japan, it's a big fat lie. So the challenge is that people in different countries and states and territories interpret dates differently, like we saw with our first example of 2nd December 2007. Or you need to deal with time zones like Tokyo, Bali, Brisbane, and Melbourne. 5:45 p.m. here is 3:45 p.m. in Tokyo. Then you need to deal with end of DST or daylight saving time. 5:45 p.m. Melbourne time on the 1st of May is 2:45 p.m. Tokyo time. It's not 3:45 p.m. as it is today. Finally, as developers, we need to develop for a global or regional audience. For example, in Australia, we have 3 primary time zones during winter and 4 summer. Not paying attention to either of these could lead us to trouble. Let's have a look. Around 10 years ago, I was working at Emirates, and our flight status module didn't pick up the correct date for the DST changeover for Romania. Passengers arrived 1 hour earlier than expected to the airport. Now, if by some chance this was 1 hour later, heads would have rolled. A flight cancellation or delay would have caused millions of dollars in lost revenue and goodwill. So how do we work with mitigating these issues? What are the strategies we can use to overcome any of these negative consequences when dealing with dates and times? Our first strategy should be to use an international standard such as ISO 8601. This standard was first introduced in 1988 and was last amended a year ago. So, no pun intended, it is very current and up to date. It makes dates and times clear and unambiguous. It reduces confusion and it's machine readable. Next, I'm going to break down this format visually. Let's have a look at today's date written in ISO 8601. The date format will consist of year, month, date or day. It will have a time separator using the English letter T. Then the time will be denoted in hours, minutes, seconds, and milliseconds. It will also have a time zone associated with it. UTC time is represented by a Z. For example, we will represent 5:45 p.m. today in this manner. You can see UTC plus 11 hours as the time zone. The second strategy we will use is relative time. Rather than saying wine o'clock or beer o'clock started at 6:45 p.m., we could say it started 30 minutes ago. This is a very natural way for humans to interpret time, and it also reduces cognitive overload. Another strategy is to provide the time zone information. Here we have used UTC plus 11, and that makes it clear to anyone reading this statement. The meetup is at 5:45 p.m. UTC plus 11 on Wednesday, 11th October. This is also a legally acceptable statement. But if we know our audience is in Japan and Melbourne, we could do a bit more to support them. We can say the meetup is at 5:45 p.m. Melbourne time or 3:45 p.m. Tokyo time on Wednesday, 11th October. This reduces the cognitive load for our audience. Let's jump into some best practice examples. Now, we know that different software approach dates and times differently. Anyone in the audience, can you give me some good examples? You can raise your hands and I'll take a few. Unix time, that's one. Anybody else? Anybody on Zoom who's got any good examples of good software where they're dealing with dates and times? No? Okay. I've got just one with Unix, so definitely we need this talk. So let's see what I have got, right? I like the fact that Windows, Android, Google, and Microsoft Live default to the time zone your network is on. Then those systems also allow you to further customize your date and time format settings. Okay, so over on Zoom, Rick is trying to add Excel as one of those good software. And there's a lot of conversation happening on Zoom, which I'm not going to get involved in. But if you've flown recently, you would also remember that airlines always mention departure and arrival times in the local time. So you don't need to make any calculations and are less likely to arrive after the flight has left. But the times are also in 24-hour format, and for some people that's a big issue. Slack shows relative time. As we discussed earlier, this just makes it easier for us to comprehend time and communicate in a timely manner. Another good example of best practice dates and times is from a web application I was involved in developing for Clipsal. We use .NET 6 in the backend and React in the front end. They work hand in hand to bring a good date time experience to our users. This is a detailed screen of a project which was created a few hours before I grabbed it. The date time design here is very clear. It speaks in both relative and absolute times. Last modified by Abraham 14 minutes ago at 15:34. So there is no room for confusion. The listing screen shows the last modified and created times in relative time here. This makes it easier for users to quickly scan through the listings. This application also outputs PDF files which are either printed on paper or distributed electronically. In these PDF files, the time zone is mentioned in a very simplistic manner, which is legally compliant. Here are some tools that I have used to help with dates and times and time conversions. Timeanddate.com. Have anybody used it yet? Yeah, right. That is my go-to when it comes to organizing meetings internationally. It's practically a lifesaver. Google Calendar also has some great features like displaying a secondary time zone and clocks from multiple time zones. You can find them in the Google Calendar settings. Now for the developers, here is some code. Humanizer is a .NET project which helps with manipulating and displaying dates, times, and time spans. Also note there is a TypeScript port of Humanizer. For example, you can see Humanizer converting various times to relative times. The first two lines convert tomorrow and 2 hours ago. You can also convert to different cultures like Japanese and Spanish, as you can see in the last 2 lines of code. This is the URL for the Humanizer project, and you can find it on GitHub. One more for the developers. You can use native browser functionality to change dates and times to a local format in 3 lines of JavaScript. Here are some tips and tricks which we use at Luminary that could be useful to you. When you're saving dates and times, always store as UTC in ISO 8601 format. You should include the time zone information where it is appropriate. Also use the correct data type and don't try to go and create your own weird data type.
Oh,
Seen that happening. When you don't know your audience or their location, always transmit data in UTC time. This can be then translated to the local time on the browser. I showed you a code snippet for it earlier. It would be ideal to use a framework such as Humanizer or a different JavaScript framework to do the conversions. Make sure that you can debug and test these conversions. Now, if you just take one thing away, always remember your audience, right? Always remember your audience. Remember, everyone interprets dates and times differently. Thank you for listening to me. I'd love to hear your thoughts and, of course, any questions you may have. And if I don't get a chance to talk to you, you can talk to me on that thing called X or Twitter or whatever it's called. Thank you.
I know Bron's desperate to say that Outlook also does dates.
Oh, no, that would cut.
That's multiple times. No, I use multiple time zones at work in Outlook, so I knew that. I knew
So
that.
what I was going to say was something that somebody just pulled out and they are 100% correct. Pulled out. Always log UTC. In fact, I'm going as far as saying say every day you've done this.
I would, yeah. And always logged in UTC. I think that's a good point as well, right? Because when you finally need to figure something out, you're not sure which time zone you're looking at, where the server is. If it's in UTC, it just makes it easier. And that's what Microsoft does in all their logs as well.
I'm overjoyed that some kids have discovered our Slido. But there is a real question that almost sounds as weird as the random questions that are put in. It's from Gav, who's desperate to know what was the ISO 8601 amendment in 2022?
What's different? What about what's changed? What's broken?
Now, I'll be honest, I didn't go in that much detail to look into it, but I think it was, I think I read it, but it just slipped my mind. Yeah, but it's current, it's up to date, right?
What's that?
Was it?
Pretty sure it was quantum.
Yeah, they just make it better. So what that sort of brings us to is it is pretty current. They do make changes to make that standard applicable to everybody.
They definitely didn't change format, right? So that's actually it. But they also define a whole bunch of time zones in our member. I think one of those was updated because someone thinks it's they're about to win on countries.
Okay, I think we have someone actually Googling.
Fans.
So it's not 23, 59, 59, 59. So you have 24.
Normal question.
Yeah.
Says, are there any HTML tags or web browsers that offer native or plug-in support for automatically transcribing any displayed date times to one's local time zone? Is that a thing that Humanizer does or no?
You can do it through Humanizer. So the question is, I'm pretty sure others would have heard it as well. Is there an HTML tag or inbuilt browser functionality which allows this? Yes, I showed you some JavaScript, but a HTML tag I'm not aware of. Anybody in the audience who knows anything? No? So yeah, doesn't seem like there is.
Suck it up, right code.
Yeah, right
Yeah.
code.
Maybe write a plugin.
Maybe write a plugin.
There you go, get rich and famous. Like
Cool.
I think we had a question in the audience. If you have one more.
We would have to deal with Gregorian.
oh,
That's a whole different subject. And sorry, the question.
non-Gregorian business. Chance.
Yep. And I hope everybody got that question because Michelle is pretty loud. No? Yeah. So the question was, had I to deal with non-Gregorian calendars? A little bit, but not enough to be an expert on it. But definitely there's lots more going into that. But what sort of I've also learned is there is usually a one-on-one match or some sort of conversion tool to convert it to the Gregorian calendar so that you can deal with it. And that's how usually people deal with it and then sort of turn it back. But yeah, it's a whole minefield there as well.
If anyone's stuck for a talk topic, 14th of February, next DDD by now, this is a perfect topic because I want to actually hear more about this. So sign yourselves up, folks. Any other questions in the audience? Cool.
Cool.
Well,
And if you followed all these advice, hopefully you will end up with a great date in the future.
that was actually a perfect wrap up.